let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk, let's talk. Conversations that cool. Kitchen talk, let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Kitchen talk, let's talk. Conversations that cool. Let's talk. What you wanna talk about? Let's talk. What you wanna talk about?
Hey.
Hi, Miss Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good today. Can't complain. Just moving things
Good.
along. Coming up
I
on this
know.
holiday weekend
I know. A long holiday weekend. Isn't that nice?
and got this Monday off. Okay.
Okay. Listen, this is Kitchen Talk CTC, Conversations That Cook. I think me and you, Dr. Kyle, we might have to hold this thing down, but I got a feeling we'll be all right. What you think?
Okay. Me too. Me too.
So we are always super excited to have you join us and give us that lively history lesson. I'm still gonna sneak in one of them classes one day and sit in and let you wow me as you do when I'm walking through the hall. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I ain't have to work. I could go in there. Woo. So is it raining where you are?
It is sprinkling a little bit.
Ah, okay. Well, I got a whole light show over here.
Oh, okay.
Now, what came to mind was what grandma used to say, get somewhere and sit down
Okay.
and
Yeah,
unplug and
I
turn
hear
everything off.
exactly. I just heard some thunder just a few minutes ago when you mentioned that.
Uh,
But I was just outside. It was sprinkling just a little bit, but I was like, let me go on inside and get ready
yeah.
for kitchen talk.
Yes. So I'm excited to have you here. Thank you so much.
No
Appreciate
problem,
you.
Miss Lisa.
So
Any opportunity to share?
I know it's so great and it's
Yes.
so needed. Like,
Mhm,
even though we got a little bit of, well, depending on where you went to school, of course,
mhm,
you got a little bit of Black history. I happen to go to a all Black high school, so I got a little bit more than I probably would have got at the PWI school.
mhm,
But still, so much to me is it's almost like it's still being unpacked
mhm, mhm,
and told to us
mhm,
through our stories, through our entertainment, through our music, through our movies. Now that we are actually able to tell the story,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
and it's so great.
mhm.
So last week, we had you remember when you had social studies class and you had to bring a current event, you had to read the newspaper and write up you might be too young for that, Kyle. You
I
had to read,
remember.
you had to read newspaper and bring your current event. So we were doing that last week, and
Mhm,
we got into this discussion, and it
mhm,
was a little bit of a debate, and
mhm,
we was like, we need a historian. And
mhm, mhm.
France said, we need to call Dr. I said Dr. Harris. I was like, yes, that's who we need to call.
Mhm.
We need to call Dr. Harris. So
Mhm.
I wanted us to talk about tonight, other than the current events, but I wanted us to talk about Juneteenth, what that means, and even get into maybe a little bit of why did they make it a national, no, a federal holiday? Because there's a
Mhm.
difference, right? Between the federal holiday and a national holiday. Is it kind of?
A
No.
bit.
Yeah. I was trying to figure that out. I was like, it's a national holiday. And somebody was like, no, it's a federal holiday. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, what's the difference? So
Uh,
I don't know. Maybe that's a poli sci question.
It might be Miss Lisa, all right, but I use those terms interchangeably
I
myself.
do too. I do too. And I thought it was interesting that it is now a holiday, a
Mhm,
federal or national, whichever way you look at it, holiday.
mhm, mhm,
So here was one of the questions that came up last week that we got into the debate about.
mhm,
It was about slavery, right?
mhm, mhm,
So I can't remember really who said what, but we were a little confused on our facts
mhm,
as far as um so my understanding is in Africa, where we all pretty much agree that society started,
mhm.
mankind, all of that, everything originated from Africa.
Everybody black. Okay.
Right, right. And so what I think I remember and what I think I understand is that Africans did have slaves, but they were like our prisoners today. Like if you committed a crime, then that was like your punishment. That was your way of paying society back for your whatever your debt was or whatever. Is
Mhm,
that you worked, I guess, as a slave for someone for so many years, and then you were free.
mhm.
And then my other understanding was that they sold slaves for guns at one time, but I don't know whether they knew that it was going to be the same type of slavery as happened. I mean, we just got turned around in that.
Yeah, how I share it is because most people that I found that a lot of people that argue that black people had slavery too are trying to discount the trauma associated with the transatlantic slave trade and chattel slavery in North and South America. And how I introduce the topic is every society on this globe has had some form of slavery. However, chattel slavery, what we know to be chattel slavery or Western slavery, was the only type of slavery that was based on the color of one's skin.
Mm-hmm.
And it was perpetual, meaning that you were born in it and you died in that system there. Yes, there was slavery taking place in Africa as there was in Europe. Feudalism and all of those things that came about during the Middle Ages, and the word slave is akin to Slavic as it relates to the Slavic peoples of Southern Europe. So all of these societies, Asian society and so forth and so on, they've all had different forms of slavery. Um, I'd say Europeans first came into contact with black folk uh, as it relates to the transatlantic slave trade in the 1400s. As it relates to enslaving people. With that, various monarchs of Portugal. What we find with Prince Henry and King John of Portugal there, we're going to find that Africans are going to be transported from that of West Africa to that of Portugal in 1444 under this quote unquote missioning expedition, wherein they were to teach Black people about Jesus and so forth. And what we're going to find there is that Black people are going to be sold, and the monarch is going to buy the majority of the slaves there in Portugal, and thus the transatlantic slave trade is going to begin in 1444. And what happens is, of course, Spain gets her hands in it. Great Britain gets her hands in it, and France, and so forth and so on, until what we find is the entire continent of Africa, excluding that of Ethiopia from time to time. The phone is ringing at the same time as Lisa. All
That's all
right.
right.
Uh, so what we're going to find is the entire continent is going to be consumed by that of what we know to be slavery, evolved into that of imperialism and colonialism and so forth and so on. So 1444, the transatlantic slave trade begins, wherein Black people are going to be taken from West Africa into that of the Iberian Peninsula. By the 1600s, what we're going to find is that Black people are going to be transported to that of North and South America in upwards of 12.5 million Black folk are going to be spread out between that of North and South America. And scholars assert that there are another 12.5 million skeletons of our ancestors that are in the Atlantic today. So I'd say, to sum up, Africans or Black people did have slavery. As we very well know, you can go all the way back to the Bible days with the Amalekites
Right.
versus the Hittites and so forth and so on. Miss Lisa, as you know, in Sunday school. And what happened is,
Right.
when they overtook those civilizations, those persons were enslaved until they were able to get to know the culture, the language, the religion, the laws, and so forth. And then they were ultimately assimilated into society. And
Uh-huh.
that's what really happened in West Africa. Of course, various tribes would take over other tribes. And of course, you don't take over the people and then allow them to go free. They could burn your house down. So, of course, you enslave them for a while, anywhere from 7 to 10, 15 years, until they recognize that they are subjects of a new nation.
Mhm.
As it relates to guns and Black folks exchanging people for guns and so forth and so on, various African kingdoms are going to exchange persons of African descent for guns and cloth during that of the 1400s all the way down to the 1800s in exchange for persons of African descent. Did a lot of these kingdoms know that they were selling us, Black folks, to white people for them to be enslaved for perpetuity? No, other civilizations did. Um, However, what you will find with that are various explorers, Vasco da Gama and so many others, when they came into West Africa, Miss Lisa, and visited West African kingdoms, they found white folk, all right, in the courts. And the
Mhm.
reason why is because, again, as it relates to slavery, Black and white folks had been sold from Rome down into what we know to
Mhm.
be Nigeria and Senegal today along those caravan routes. So it was nothing odd about seeing white slaves, in Africa and so forth and so on. But I'd say that African slavery was not based on the color of one's skin, and it was
Mhm.
not for perpetuity. What we're going to find is in North and South America, if it was not for Black people, Western Europe, nor North America and South America would not have the advanced economies that they have today if it was not for the
Mhm.
trauma, the enslavement of Black people for 500
Mhm.
years that built Great Britain, that built Paris, all right, that built New Jersey and Georgia and Florida and all of these places that we see today.
Yeah.
So hopefully that kind of answers your question a little bit.
It
But
did.
yeah,
It
but I
did.
always come for people that say, well, oh, Black people had slavery too. But let's say there is a big distinction there. All right.
Right.
As it relates to what was going on in America, most
Mhm.
particularly North America, Anglo America, which came to be known as the United States today. Of course, it was built on that principle of white supremacy and slavery. And that's how America was able to advance and industrialize the way in which it did was because of the institution of slavery. The same with Great Britain, the same with France, and so forth and so on. If it was not for us,
Wow.
okay,
We'll still be around here like cavemen.
okay, they would still be running around, all right, talking about the Black Death and not taking baths and not eating 3 meals a day and
Right.
using deodorant and so forth and so on. All of those things that Black people introduced to Europe, all right, just hygiene, general hygiene, all right, and so forth and so on that Black people, introduced to that of the Iberian Peninsula. I'd say when the Moors were able to colonize what we know to be that today of Portugal, Spain, and southern France. They brought that of just hygiene methods, aqueducts, 3 meals a day, introducing cotton and grain, and so many, introducing libraries. Prior to this point, there were only two libraries in Europe prior to that of Black people coming into that of Southern Europe, and so forth and so on. Libraries, what we know to be the day of books and all of those things, originated on the continent. All right. But of course, those things are not taught in school. So people, most particularly Black kids and Latinx kids, are led to believe that all knowledge came from white people or all knowledge came from Europe. And
Right.
it it starts that indoctrination or that colonization of the mind starts early on in kindergarten, and it works its
Mm-hmm.
way up to that of 12th grade. And by the time you get to 11th or 12th grade, because you are so indoctrinated to that of white centered learning, you're compelled at that point to attend white schools, therefore
Mm-hmm.
giving more money to a white establishment because that's all
Mm-hmm.
you know. It's just that's how insidious and complex racism is, and how entrenched I'd say it is as it relates to our K through 12 educational systems. And it's just up to us to take ownership, as you said earlier, Miss Lisa, taking ownership of our history, taking ownership of
Yeah.
our culture, being keepers of our culture, being protectors of our freedom, being ambassadors. I'm using Dr. Matthew's slogan now,
Yes, yes,
ambassadors for creativity, and so forth and so on, as it relates to who we are. All right. So we start first, and I hear a lot of people say that, and I truly believe it. We start first with us,
yeah,
educating and liberating us, and then we move out
yeah,
into that of other cultures and societies.
yeah.
Because history teaches us that for far too long, uh, Black people have been ignored or marginalized as it relates to that of mainstream society, most particularly in the United States. And it's up to us to ultimately, in protest to that, to
Mm-hmm.
and center and value who we are, authentically who we are, as we can in the absence of that of white centered culture and customs and so forth and so on.
Wow. Kim Black,
Hi
Hello,
there.
Kim.
Hi there,
I see you
Mr.
still
Carl
working, girl.
Harris.
Yes,
Huh?
ma'am.
Listen, they gonna miss me for a couple days. Payback
Mhm.
is gonna be real. It's gonna be real. It's gonna be
Yes.
real.
So we're just digging into you were here last week when we had
Mhm.
the discussion about the slavery, so I want to jump jump with that really quickly and right into it because again, if we don't really fully know and understand our history, then
Um,
we are bound to repeat it from my. And I think that it is well, let me ask you this, Dr. Harris, Dr. Kyle. How would you how would you start this discussion with say your 6, your 7, your 8-year old about
mm,
who they are and where they come from without because I understand a little bit of the inclination to shield them from the ugly. So how do we get those kind of conversations started with our youth?
Oh, of course, I'm not an early childhood education major, so I'm going to take it from so I'm going to see what I can do with this. Um, as it relates to sharing our history and our culture and so forth and so on with our 6, 7 year olds and so forth and so on, I think it's just up to us to try to steep them in um, Black authors.
Mm,
Um, as it relates to black centered cartoons and so forth and so on, as it relates to document stuffings and all of these animated characters and so forth and so on, that in which they are able to subtly pique our kids' interest in who they are, and
mhm,
so forth and so on. And it also teaches them at an early age who they are, and it builds confidence in who they are as they are
mhm,
moving through those grade
mhm,
levels. So I'd say starting early on with that of selecting books for our children that speak specifically to African/Black culture, um, family dynamics, heritage, and so forth, starting our kids off with the significance of Kwanzaa at an early
mm,
age as it relates. And we know Kwanzaa reinforces our legacy, our history, our culture, and so forth and so on as ways to, I'd say, ingratiate our kids or to introduce our children to that of Black family life, Black history, Black culture, and centering Black economics and so forth. So I'd say starting with Black books. All right.
mhm,
Even in our religious spaces, being unapologetic as we look at various sects of Black people that are found, in Christian spaces in the Bible and Islamic
Mm-hmm.
spaces and so forth and so on, so that it will reinforce that we have always been there and we were
Mm-hmm.
never absent. And I came up in a school system wherein, entire grade levels would go by and Black people would be absent from the stories in literature, the stories in
Mm-hmm.
history, and so forth and so on. And at least you believe that ultimately Black people started with that of Harriet Tubman being enslaved, and then it goes to Martin Luther King, and that's it, versus looking at the African kingdoms of the past and how they
Mm-hmm.
far outweighed that of Western Europe during that of the 1400s, Abu Bakari, the second, and so forth and so on. Looking at all of those books, just being selective about what our kids watch, what our kids read, and so forth and so on, because we know what white-centered entertainment does to the minds of young Black
Mm-hmm.
and brown children.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that's just how I would look at it. We may find another professor in early childhood ed that may say something totally different, but that's my take on that.
So, Elsa, I think that is great. I think definitely us showing our children and reinforcing that we are a wonderful people, without giving them so much of the ugly, but instilling that confidence in that we always been here, like you said, we always been here, and we're not going nowhere.
Mhm.
That's the other part.
And
We
listen, I have a question. Like, I have this thing about baby dolls.
Mhm,
I require
mhm,
I got a lot of grandchildren. So a lot of so their moms would buy baby dolls, even
mhm,
my nieces.
mhm,
And I would get mad why you didn't buy a baby doll that looked like her.
mhm, mhm,
Mm,
mhm, mhm.
And they'd be like, Mama, you doing the most. No, I'm not doing the wrong. I need for them to be able to relate to a baby that look like them. Everybody hair ain't silky blonde.
Yes, and that just goes back in history with that of Kenneth and Mamie Clark. Uh, they did this baby doll test, uh, ultimately arguing about the psychological effects of white-centered culture and using Anglo-Saxon objects in white homes and so forth and so on. And what we find with that baby doll test is that they presented to that of a Black child ultimately during the early years of the civil rights movement. What we found is the child was more inclined to reach for that white doll, in essence, showing the psychological effects of racism, showing the psychological effects of these European modes of beauty that people
mhm.
have been taught to adore, that of the long, straight hair, the narrow nose, the small lips, and so forth and so on, the light skin. The more light you are, the more akin you are to refinement, and so forth and so on. So I'd say in protest or to reinforce the results of that baby doll test, it's just very important that we buy dolls of color, all right, toys of color for our children. I remember my best friend, Miss Lisa. Her daughter took a picture with the Frozen character Esmeralda, and she posted it on Facebook. And I was like, I will not buy. Do not allow her to take any more pictures with a white girl on her T-shirt. All right. And I put that in the comments. And the reason being, it just goes back to Kenneth and Mamie Clark and what they had to say about the psychological effects of racism. All
Yeah,
right, let's not reinforce to our children that this
yeah,
is the standard, all right, and so forth and so on. And it's all right to, share with them the beauty of all races and so forth and so on. But we need
sure.
to reinforce with them that there is a history of Black, dark skin, wide noses, large lips, kinky hair being othered, being ugly, being unattracted, and so forth and
Right.
so on. And the only way that we can disrupt that is to unapologetically center African American or African
Yeah.
standards of beauty and so forth. So that's why I think, Ms. Kim, that is just so important, because it harkens back to that of history. And I know that that is not necessarily taught in our K through 12 system, because in a lot of cases they try to link this stuff to CRCT or whatever, critical race theory. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with that. But the thing about it is, I just think that this history that's taught in K through 12 systems, I can say it, Miss Lisa. Hopefully, I won't ever have to go there to teach, knock on wood. All right. It's used to indoctrinate our Black children. All right. And if we don't do what we need to do outside of that school system, they
Right.
will be led to believe that all white things are better. All right. And white schools, white bosses, white businesses, all of those things are better just because white people work there.
Right.
And ultimately, it has been reinforced in history, in literature, in science, and in all of these areas, Miss Lisa. Black people were
Black
always
people.
there,
Always
inventing and building and all of these things, but they have been purposefully left out of
Of the
our
story.
textbook. So
Yeah.
it's just up to us. And people get mad at me sometimes at Bethlehem Church. Every time I get up, I talk about Black folk. Okay.
That's right.
All right. And I tell them that Jesus told me, just like he told Nat Turner. Okay. And they get scared. All right. To talk about Black people every chance we get, because it's up to us in that AME space or in that Baptist space or in that space in those fraternities and sororities to reinforce who we are, not
Right.
only to our children, but we have to realize the number of Black people, Miss Lisa, Miss Kim, that did not get the type of history that we got, maybe at a HBCU or at a Black majority high school and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
It escapes them. And because it escapes them and because they don't have that foundation there, you find that people don't vote. You find that people vote against ultimately their neighborhoods, or vote against the advancement of their neighborhoods because they don't understand in a lot of cases how political parties work. All right.
Yeah.
And how political parties, even with that of the Democratic Party, in a lot of cases, how it continues to exploit Black people generation after generation. So once you realize that you work to make the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, whatever party that may be, better as it relates to meeting the needs of our people.
Right.
And again, unapologetically our people, because
Yeah.
for 400, 250 years, Black folks were legally not cared for in this country. So we're having to play, Miss Kim, catch up.
Catch up.
All right. So every chance we get, you got to censor Black people. And most particularly, I was listening to this other telecast a few minutes ago, talking about censoring Black people and so forth and so on. And you have to bring in that class lens in on Black folk. And what I mean there, Miss Kim, Miss Lisa, pro-Black folk. All right. And I know I just used my African-American vernacular English. All right. But censoring the needs of, let me sound like an academic, Miss Lisa, impoverished Black people. All right. But
what that word is?
Censoring
that word means
the needs of us. All right. Because, James Baldwin talks about that in a lot of cases. If you want to really know how the government is working to meet the needs of communities, talk to the poor people.
Yeah.
Okay. And they will tell you how the government has not met their needs and the types of schemes that have been played. Yeah. And how can I say this? And I know where Georgia is early voting and all of these types of things right now, and Florida is coming up on an election and so forth and so on. But once we understand how American politics has exploited Black folks generation after generation, we will understand, Miss Lisa and Miss Kim, why Black people say my vote doesn't count. Why Black people say I'm not going to vote. And we really need, in social sciences, arts, and humanities, we need to center those responses and work to meet the needs of the people. Those folks have no confidence in the system because the system has not yielded them any results. All right, time after time after time. We can't be critical of them when they give us that response. We just can't, because we know what these political systems do to poor Black, brown people time after time after time. And what we need to do ultimately is go back to our politicians, go back to our leaders and say, this is why people are not voting. It's because of the habitual LIESs. All right. Just in
the lines. I'll say it for you. It's the lines.
Just in case the old people may be listening today.
Right.
All right. So, you get to that point. So once we began, I think, Miss Lisa, Miss Kim, to begin to meet the needs of poor people, all right, where they see that their votes really matter, people will be more inclined to do so. And the system of capitalism that we have in place is meant to keep people on the bottom. All right,
Right.
that's how capitalism works, to keep a working poor that never
Mhm.
rises. You get
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And that's what this country was built on,
Yeah.
keeping them exploited.
Right.
And those people at the lower rim of society, ultimately, they never reap the benefits. They
Yeah.
never reap the benefits. And what we need to do, or what I try to do as a I can't say as a professor. I don't think FAMU will find me. As a professor, is meet the needs of poor Black people. You know what
Uh-huh.
I'm saying? Unapologetically in every way I can. Now, I know that white folks in my class and so forth and so on, and I unpack it in a way in which they understand, you know what I'm saying, that it ain't you, Johnny, the white
Right.
boy. All right, it's your ancestors. All right,
Right.
and if you're on the team with us, you're going to work to dismantle those systems that your ancestors put in
Right.
place. We're
Right.
working together, cross that of color lines, cross that of religious lines, and so forth and so on, to ultimately make this nation, a more perfect union. I was Miss Lisa. I was teaching Sunday school the other week, and they got kind of mad at me, but honey, it was right down my alley. All right, and it talked about, ultimately in a lot of cases how those prophets were critical of the nation and so
Mhm.
forth and so on, and how that made them patriots. And as it relates to Black people today, liberated Black people today, the only way that we can be true patriots of America is to be critical of this country in a way
Mm.
in which we make it better.
Mhm.
You hear so many people of other political parties, I'm not going to say who they are. I'm proud to be an American. Well, at least I know I'm free. All right, and so forth and so on. And America is great, and you shouldn't speak against this country, and so forth and so on. Most of those people, okay, I'm gonna leave that alone. Benefits have
Yeah,
benefited
benefits.
Right.
generationally from that
Right.
of white supremacy and slavery. So therefore, they're happy to be
Yes.
Americans.
Yes.
But if you're so happy to be an American and you think that democracy is the standard for the world, let's work at home. All
Yeah.
right, the Williams brothers say, "Sweep around your." Okay, remember
Your
that song?
own.
The
Your
well,
own front door.
on the VHS, your own front door. All right, I used to get the broom at home. All right, and do it to the video. All right, before you try to sweep around mine. All right, so ultimately, we have to sweep around our own front door, and that's what I try to do. And I know that in a lot of cases, Miss Lisa, there are challenges within our Black
Mhm.
community. You get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But what I have to ask myself before being uh, as most particularly critical in the spaces where you have mixed company is,
Mhm.
Kyle, what are you doing about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And if I'm not doing anything about it, don't talk on it.
Don't
Just
talk
leave
on
that
it. Yeah.
alone. You get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Because everybody in that mixed company may not be on your team. All
Yeah.
right. Miss Lisa, Miss Kim, my mama used to tell me before she dropped us off at the babysitter, she used to make us repeat after her. All right. When you get inside of there with the babysitter, they ask you something that goes on at my house. What are you supposed to say, Quentin? You have to ask my
I've done
mama.
that. I've done
She,
that.
so, and she would turn around to my sister and I. She said, "Let's say it together. You have to ask
Yes,
my
mama.
mama." Right. And I'm saying all that to say that we have to be protectors of our Black space.
Yeah.
You get what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
When outsiders come and try to be critical of who we are, we have to be protectors of our space. All right.
Mhm.
And keep that positive message alive while working to make things better internally. You get what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
And ultimately, you'll as the babysitter and her friends used to do with my mom, they stopped asking um, us questions because they knew that we were rehearsed in what we were supposed to say.
Mhm.
All right, to them, and so forth and so on. So just being protectors of our space,
Yeah.
I'd say. And I know I'm going all over the place, Miss Lisa,
No, you fine.
sharing,
Hey,
but
this is kitchen talk.
and
We talk about everything.
I forgot what the question was. I've gone so far. But anyway,
No, you
you know.
good. You good. So let me ask you this too, both of y'all. Do you think that sometimes, or this next generation is so far removed um from slavery and from oppression in a way that our parents and grandparents and great grandparents saw it, that they don't I don't want to say value, I want to say They think it's irrelevant.
Oh,
They kind of move sometimes like it's irrelevant. Like, well, I don't have to go to a HBCU. I can go to any school I want to go to. Versus there was a time if you was black, you only went to it. They actually built the HBCU for you to go to because they didn't want you at their school. You know, that sort of thing. So our children or our young people or this next generation, are they so far removed from it where they not able to talk to a great grandparent? Like I don't remember. I remember my mom talking about when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and my mom was from Jacksonville, and she would talk about the rioting and everything that went on just in Jacksonville. But I don't my grandparents, my father's grandfather was an obstetrician, and my grandfather, my mom's grandfather, was a postman. And they both broke color barriers, during those times. So hearing those stories, but did I hear a story about family actually being, enslaved or were slaves? I didn't really hear that. So if I'm saying I didn't hear it, then that next generation may not have heard stories, and then the next generation may not have heard stories. So I guess I'm saying, are they able to relate to it if they don't really have a connection to it?
how can I say this, Miss Lisa? I, I really don't know what goes through the heads of these children these days. Um,
True.
God
Neither
called
do
me into
I.
that ministry, so I work with college students, and I'm saying all that to say I think it's up to us at the college level to make that connection,
Mm,
because with all of these anti-woke bills, Miss Kim, that are being passed, and all of these other things that are being passed to keep history white and male dominated,
mhm,
it's going to be on us, Miss Lisa, to make that connection. That connection may not happen at home.
mm,
And as you were saying earlier, as it relates to that of slavery and Jim Crow, I think it has a lot to do with the trauma that was associated with slavery, the trauma that was associated with lynchings and Jim Crow and so forth and so on. And the example that I use in my classes, in a lot of cases, I talk about Law and Order SVU. All right, and how Olivia is trying to get those rape victims to share their story, and they're like, "No, I don't want to talk about it. Get away from my house." All right, and that trauma that went along with it. All right. In a
mhm,
lot of cases, it's
mhm,
life altering to watch a family member be lynched or to watch a family member being sold to another family. Those are stories that you keep to yourself, that you don't tell subsequent generations.
mhm,
And in a lot of cases, that's how things are lost. And there were deadly consequences to
mm,
telling those
mhm,
stories. So it's like, if I
mhm.
want the next generation to live, I'm not going to tell them that
Yeah,
Uncle Johnny
yeah.
was lynched. I'm just going to tell them Uncle Johnny never came back home. All right.
Mhm,
And so forth and so on, to protect them again from
mhm,
ultimately future trauma and death that could come along with those harrowing instances of violence that was associated with white supremacy during that time period. So the few stories that we have, I try to reinforced chapter one of Philip Dre's At the Hands of Persons Unknown, with the lynching of Sam Holmes. I think the title of the chapter is A Negro's Life is a Very Cheap Thing in Georgia, just giving them a
mhm,
description of what took place at
mhm,
general lynching, for them to understand what really took place, and also to understand why these stories were not told. All right, in
mhm,
a lot of cases. But again, I think it's up to us to make that connection. And I know, again, with all of these different laws that various former Confederate states are passing, all right, and so forth and so
mhm,
on, and former Union states too. All right, I'm gonna leave that
mhm,
alone. What we found out during the Great Migration was that white people were just as prejudiced in New Jersey and Detroit as they were in Birmingham, Alabama. But I'm going to leave that alone. But I'm saying all that to say here it's just up to us to make that connection. Maybe we'll miss some. All right. But that's, again, going back to our religious spaces. All right. When Jews go to the synagogue and so forth and so on, no, they learn about God. All right. And they also learn about their history and culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
My thing is that's why I reinforce what I do at Bethel and so forth and so on. If y'all come up in here, you gonna learn about Jesus and some more Black folks as well. Not only the ones in the Bible, but the ones from 1962. All right. And so forth and so on.
Right.
Church class, because again, that reinforces history reinforces confidence. All right, when you know from whence you have come. All right, when you know that you have to stand on the shoulders of your ancestors, when you know how hard they worked ultimately to ensure that your parents got an education, how hard they worked in a lot of cases to go to college. And as it relates to my great grandparents, my great grandparents would not let my granddaddy go to college because their thing was, we need him here on the farm to help us. Because if he's not here, the white banks will take my farm because I will be down a hand. You get what I'm saying? So it's best for Willie B to stay here and farm with us. I'm sorry, Black teacher, he may be smart, but he was not going to college. I'm sorry, because we have to, protect our property. And that's what, again, capitalism and racism and white supremacy did to Black people, where you had to make tough decisions, where Black people, in a lot of cases, Miss Lisa, like my grandparents, had to quit school in the 9th and 10th grade. You get what I'm saying? To provide for the family. All right. At that point, because ultimately, if you don't, everything that my great grandparents worked for could be taken.
Yeah.
And it was fixed that way through that of Jim Crow, so that the vast majority of Black people did not have access to college. That was on purpose. You get what I'm saying? So if I know that my granddaddy wanted to go to college, and I know that he was so smart, Miss Lisa, my granddaddy could fix a washing machine, he could fix a car, he could fix an iron, anything you got an iron at home. If he was still alive right now, I would give it to him. He could take those wires apart and make that iron work perfectly.
Electrical engineering right there.
9th grade education. So think about what my granddaddy would have done with a baccalaureate degree. You get what I'm saying? And so on. If he can do that, if he did that with a 9th grade education, I felt like Miss Lisa, he and my grandmother was Sanford and Son. Anything that anybody put out on the garbage, all right, like bicycles and washing machines, and they picked them up and put them on the back of the truck and brought them home, and they fixed them. My grandmother knows they had multiple washing machines and dryers, but I'm going to leave that.
I love it.
Deep freezers and so forth and so on. They could make all of these presumably torn up lawnmowers and bicycles and stuff. They could make them come alive. All right. So you see what I'm saying there? So if they could do all of that and not have access to school, I have to stand on their shoulders and build on the legacy of the Smiths and the Harrises and so forth and so on. If they came this far, I gotta make the next step. There are no excuses. If my grandparents, with the 9th and 10th grade education, they could own tens of 20 and 30 acres of land, and on my dad's side, hundreds of acres of land and so forth and so on, with a limited educational background. I got to do more. All right. If they own, Miss Lisa, 100 acres, I got to own at least 500. Okay. And I'm just, how you have to speak those things into existence in the church.
I hear you.
I have to own a 500-acre farm.
Yes.
If Big Mama and them could own 100-acre farm, I got to be able to own 500 acres. All right. You get what I'm saying there?
Right.
So again, making that connection. I know that connection because ultimately I asked questions of my grandparents, and early on, they would tell you that was none of your business. But as I got up around 16 and 17, that's when they started telling me all of these stories. Like my grandmother had kids, like 66, 67, 68. And two of my uncles, they were in the same grade. So when I looked at the yearbook, Miss Lisa, I said, somebody stayed back. And she said, no, they were just 10 months apart. And I was looking at her. She said, well, back in the day, all I knew was to have babies. You know what I'm saying? And that's all people knew,
There
because
she told you.
the more kids you had, the greater the likelihood of you keeping your property and so
Yeah.
forth and so on.
Yeah, to
So
work the
the
land.
thing was, have as many kids as possible. All right.
Right.
And that within itself was in essence standing up or a resistance tactic to white supremacy. The more kids I have working this farm, it
Right.
increases the likelihood of us keeping it in the family.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if I didn't know about Jim Crow, lynchings, and so forth and so on, I would look at my grandmother as what? An irresponsible parent. Why do you have so many children? It doesn't make any sense. And that's where the historical component comes in. And again, Miss Lisa, coming back to that original question, a lot of our kids are not going to get a Black college education. We have laws that are being passed in various states that are basically saying you can't talk about Black history. All right. So again, it's up to us and our fraternities, our sororities, our church spaces, our civic organizations, and so forth to reinforce that with our children. And all of those organizations should have a youth component, a youth empowerment component. And if they don't in 2022, they gotta have one. You get what I'm saying? Because if not, like you said, Miss Lisa, the connection will be lost.
Yeah.
And what I do in my classes, I start early. The first day I open up with everybody being Black. All right. And sometimes it makes a white person in class slide down like that. All right. But when I unpack it, all right, they get it. All right. The civilization started in that of sub-Saharan Africa. So you might be white right now. All right. But your great grandmama, all right, was dark skinned with some kinky hair. It just straightened over time. All right. And turned blonde. All right, and so forth and so on. So establishing, those facts early on and just reinforcing with them that race was put in place as a social construct, a geopolitical phenomenon, and so forth and so on, to keep people divided and ultimately to build on capitalism, So, and once people understand that, you're good. All right, and so forth and so on. But, that's generally my first lecture, Ms. Lisa, of everybody being Black. All right, but
I love it.
But hey, that to answer your question, I'd say it's up to us. It's up to us to make that connection. If not, it will truly be lost.
Yeah. So let's get into a little bit of the history of Juneteenth, and then I also want to know your thoughts on Biden signing it into a national or federal holiday. Are we saying now that America is owning up to slavery? Because they have not admitted that yet. No atonement has been made.
Okay. So
I can't wait.
Miss Lisa, you saw how I looked when you said that. But anyway, so Juneteenth, what we know is that recognizes ultimately the last set of enslaved Africans were declared free in the Confederacy. We know in September of 1862, in September of 1862, what we're going to find is Abraham Lincoln is going to issue that Emancipation Proclamation, wherein he's arguing that Black people in the Confederacy would be free. All right. And that was essentially a dead letter. And January 1st, 1863 in Tallahassee, in Blakely, Georgia, it was business as usual. I wish a Negro would say that he was free. All right. And I'm saying all that to say it freed Black people in Union occupied lands, but that was not the vast majority. It was maybe 4,000 people. You had 4 million Black folk that were enslaved, and the Emancipation Proclamation only emancipated maybe about 4,000. All right. And the reason why Abraham Lincoln did that, okay, Cal, he was racist within.
Why he did it? Tell the people.
So The reason why he did it, now when he was running, when he was campaigning, he basically said, now I won't be the candidate for black people. All right. And even while the Civil War was going on, he told them, I'm paraphrasing here in 1862, he told the South, if you all would just join back up with the Union, I'll let you all keep slavery to 1900. All right.
Wow.
But he has been held
Oh my
in our
God,
K-12
Effie,
system as
Effie,
the
not.
hero of the great white savior of the black race. But he
Right.
was just as racist as the next.
Right.
And for you to issue such a dead letter for slaves in Tallahassee was a slap in the face. You get what I'm saying? In January 1st, 1863. So what we find is, you know, the Union soldiers, you know, they marched all through here. I think they had a battle down here at the Battle of Natural Bridge. All right, that's as far as they came up to Tallahassee before the end of the Civil War. And I'm saying all that to say some black people were free. But on April 9th, 1865, the Civil War was over. And at that point, the Confederacy surrendered to that of the Union, and slavery was supposedly abolished. All right, by December of 1865, it was abolished. All right. And what I'm saying there, from April until August, Miss Lisa, these racist behind white folk, they were trying to get the butter from the duck. Meaning, until a Union army or Union official came to that plantation or that town and said that black people were free, oh, you were enslaved. Okay.
Wow.
You remember, I don't care about the Civil War being over. Nobody has come to this hick town and told you that you were free. All right. So, and what was happening between that of April and August was the word was traveling, and Freedmen's Bureau agents and Union officials were going from town to town. And what we find in Galveston, Texas, by that of August, is that ultimately the last sect, I'd say, of scholars assert the last sect of enslaved Africans were declared free, and there was a celebration year after year to mark that date. And the reason why we celebrated, Miss Lisa, is that on July 4th, 1776, as Frederick Douglass and so many others have said, black folks weren't free. Okay, that didn't have anything to do with black folk. All right. But we go all out and red, white, and blue, and we pop firecrackers and so forth and so on. And the thing about it, Miss Lisa, most of us don't know. And I'm saying that most of us don't. So you can't be critical of them because they don't know. And that's what I tell myself all the time, Kyle, you're not doing enough, because if you would have taught them, they wouldn't be buying firecrackers. All right. And so forth and so on July 4th. They would be celebrating on June 19th and so forth and so on. And I'm saying all that to say, again, this white male-centered narrative has been written into our textbooks, wherein even though black people were omitted in a lot of cases as it relates to that of the American Revolution, it's just automatically assumed that everybody was free. But that was not the case. George Washington had slaves. Thomas Jefferson had slaves. All those presidents had slaves. There were slaves in the White House and so forth and so on. And we need to celebrate our day. All right. So that's how that came into being. However, I must talk about this, Miss Lisa. There was a loophole in that 13th Amendment. Okay. And it was intentional, just like the 14th Amendment. The wording in the 14th Amendment is vague on purpose. That's why we had to have a civil rights movement, or the Second Reconstruction in the 1960s. That wording, that word choice was specifically written in a way that white people could re-enslave black folks in the South. All right. In essence, white people were paid. They got reparations.
They
in
got
essence,
for 40 acres and a mule.
Miss Lisa, I'm trying to calm down. All right, because the CIA could be watching this telecast. All right, but anyway, and I may say something quote unquote un-American. All right, but I'm saying all that to say here, there was a loophole there wherein that 13th Amendment said that slavery was abolished except as a punishment for a crime. And what we're going to find there in Tallahassee and in other places. All right, May 20th, 1865 in Tallahassee, black people were free. Miss Kim, we took a 3-week vacation. All
We
right.
did.
And it was warranted. All right. We're going to post up. All right. No, we're not working for you. We know we can't have hams, but we will have roasted squirrel. We will have roasted rabbit. All right. We're going to make this work for us. And what the South is going to do is institute black codes, Miss Lisa, wherein you had to have a job. And where were you to work? For white folks. And if you did not work, they arrested you for loitering. At that point, you had committed what, Miss Lisa? A crime. So therefore, you were going back in a lot of cases to those very same plantations, Miss Lisa, to work as a slave. All right. And if you read the African American Odyssey by Darlene Clark Hine, honey, those are some funny stories, Miss Lisa, of how we cussed them white folks out that day we found out we were free. All right, and so forth and so on. We went back into the big house one last time. I got to tell you something, Master. Kiss my so-and-so. All right, I'm out of here. All right, but those black coats in a lot of cases, in essence, allowed the Jim Crow South to rise again. It allowed white supremacy to rise again, wherein black people were relegated to that of sharecropping. All right. In a lot of cases, my grandparents on my mom's side, my great grandparents on my mom's side, they were sharecroppers all the way down into the 1960s, where you were forced to work for white people because they were the business owners. There were no black businesses that you could say, hey, Miss Lisa, can I work for you? You had to go back to those same racist white people and work again. And what we're going to find here is this, Miss Lisa, and you can, I have my kids to watch 13th on Netflix, and it kind of brings the narrative together. So what you're going to find is a second form of slavery, or a pseudo form of slavery called that of Jim Crow from about 1865 until about 1965 in the South, wherein what you're going to find is over 50% of black women are going to work for white folks cleaning up. Over 50% of black women in the South are going to work in domestics, working for white people. All right, cleaning houses. All right, my grandmother did it, Miss Lisa, for $2 a day. She could work 4 houses. She said, "Course, and I knew how to do it. You start about 10, you go in there, you start washing and get that dinner done. You can make $8, and I was home in time for my children." So my grandmother made $2 per house, Miss Kim.
We did it. So resilient.
But she said I could take down 4 houses in a day, Quincy. But anyway, I'm saying all that to say, you all, that black people were placed back into a pseudo form of slavery, farm hands, working in inferior positions during that 100-year period. Then civil rights movement happens. You have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the one of 1957, Voting Rights Act of 1965, wherein black people are getting all of the freedoms that white people had. Then you have a rise of something, Miss Lisa, that we know under Nixon and Reagan and so forth and so on, of this war on drugs. And that's when you have the present form of slavery today, which is mass incarceration, wherein you find 1 in 3 black men will go to jail in this current time period in America today, wherein America is less than 25% of the world's population, but we lock up the most people, more people than any other country in the world. You get what I'm saying? And think about this, and we lock up more people, and those people are slaves of the state, Miss Lisa. Right. And we are, guess what? Not only do we lock up the most people, think about slaves of the state, and also America is the richest nation. Okay.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
What we find here is this continuous narrative of exactly. It's a continuous narrative of exploiting black bodies to build white wealth. And I stay on that, ultimately, that theme throughout class. All right. Were there black people that resisted? Yes, they were. Nat Turner was my hero. Miss Lisa, I was with him. I came back again in 1986. But when we were going from house to house, I was there. Okay, that's what I tell my students, and they bust out laughing. All right. But I was there. All right. We were going from house to house, just murdering people. All right. But anyway, but I'm like the people on that show on Netflix. What is it called, Miss Lisa, where the people came back after so many years? You know what I'm talking about? With the families and the what's the name of the show? It was popular on Netflix here last year, Miss Lisa, where the people were in the plane crash and the plane disappeared, and then they came back years later.
I can't remember the name, but I saw the picture.
Yes. I can't think of the name to save my life, but that's what I tell my kids. All right. And I came back in 1986 after I assassinated so many families with Nat Turner. All right, and so forth, so on in the 1800s. All right, I had my 48 hours of fame with Nat Turner, and then I died, and then I was reincarnated. All right, but anyway, but just just sharing those stories there. So that's
Yeah.
Juneteenth. All right,
Yeah.
we talked about Juneteenth. All right, that's how Juneteenth came about.
Mhm.
And of course, it's a day of freedom, but I think it's a day in which we need to work to liberate more people and
Mhm.
dismantle these systems of oppression
Yeah.
that enslave today.
Yeah.
All right. As it relates to Joe Biden and signing Juneteenth into law and all that kind of stuff, you have symbolism versus substance. All
Mm.
right. That big old sign down there between Gaines and Warnish, that's symbolism. All right. It
Symbol-
says Black Lives Matter in a space where black people can't even go in and get a hotel room. All right. I'm going to leave that alone. All right. Because we can't afford it. But you have a huge sign there that says, okay, but I'm going to leave that alone. All right. So you have symbolism. You have this sound into a federal law. And a lot of places like FAMU and other places get that day off, but other places don't let their employees off.
Right.
All right. What I mean by substance there is really examining what slavery did to
Yeah.
Black people
Yeah.
and how it built this country, and having candid
Yeah.
conversations on
Yeah.
how slavery ultimately generated billions of dollars for white people in this country.
Yeah.
And guess what? We have essentially nothing. All right.
Nothing.
I looked at this study, ultimately, Miss Kim, wherein Black people have to live and die 17 times to meet the net wealth of white folks in this country currently. I can't even think, Miss Lisa, of Kyle Harris the 17th. All right.
Right.
That's where we will meet the net wealth of white people currently in this country.
Wow.
So having candid conversations about racism, all right, having candid conversations about reparations and what they can do
Yeah.
for us
Yeah.
to, in essence, decrease that wealth gap and
Yeah.
close that wealth gap.
Yeah.
Because guess what? White folks have a 17 generation head start on Black folks in this country. And
Yeah.
guess what? It doesn't close, it just moves, Miss Lisa.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
ultimately, as it relates to what's going on in this country, it widens. The gap
Yeah.
just widens. So it's
Yeah.
just up to us again, as it relates to substance, ultimately passing laws in essence so that we can continue to center these conversations on reparations. Y'all have done it for the Japanese. Y'all talk about it for the Jews and all of these types of people. But what about Black folks, the people that built? Okay.
Right. Right.
All right. I was reading earlier 400 Souls, all right, and ultimate with the Mayflower versus that of the White Lion. All right. We are taught, Miss Lisa, about the Mayflower in 1620 with the Pilgrims, all right, and so forth and so on,
Yeah.
and Thanksgiving and
The
oh
Nina, the Pizza, and the
and,
Santa Maria.
and all of that. Okay, and so forth and so on. And ultimately, and the white people, they loved the Native Americans so much, and they had supper together, and that's why we celebrate Thanksgiving and so forth and
Thanksgiving.
so on. But in
Did you celebrate
1619,
the massacre afterwards?
exactly, they killed them. All right, it wasn't even a year. Murdered, you're dead.
Right.
All right,
Right.
so but you don't tell part two of the story because that's
Right.
inappropriate for children. My argument is, Miss Kim, don't tell part one then. Okay,
Right.
just don't tell part one. But I'm
Right.
saying all that to say there was another ship called the White Lion. All right,
Mm.
that landed on these shores in 1619 with quote unquote 20 and odd Negroes,
Mhm.
wherein we start the story of persons of African descent in Anglo America began. But that is not the Mayflower is reinforced with our children, Miss Lisa. You get what I'm saying, Miss Kim? But the
Mhm.
White Lion that brought Black folks, oh, that's inappropriate. Oh, da 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 da. All right, and so forth and so on. So it's up to us to make sure that our stories, all of our stories, are
It's told.
integrated into that
Yeah.
of the American
Yeah.
narrative.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, you hear Joe Biden and all of these people talk about the soul of America. Okay. There's never been a soul of America. All right. We are standing on a contradiction. All right. There's always been these two opposing souls. All right. So what we have to do is integrate those narratives
Yeah.
together to begin to make this country a more perfect union. But it requires hard questions.
Yeah.
All right. It requires hard questions to be answered. All
Yeah.
right. Questions that are deemed to be inappropriate.
Yeah.
All right. People like me, Kyle, you might not want to come with us to this meeting. Please be quiet before we go in here. All right. And so forth and so on. All right. So, and Miss Lisa, I just get to the point where I know I'm just meant for this. I was thrown out of class on September 11th, 2001, because I asked where the black folks said. Because, I was watching the Twin Towers, okay, fall down, Miss Kim. But I was sitting there with Kamara because I've always been concerned, Miss Lisa, about black people. I said, Kamara Quan. Now I know it was some black folks in there cleaning up. You couldn't tell me it was no black folks in there mopping or working
Come
in the
on.
deli or what have you. And so I was like, well, why are they not coming out? So I raised my hand, Miss Lisa. I said, you know what I said? I said it just this black and country. Where the black folks at? Kyle, just get out. Just get out. All right. But those are important questions. I was like, where are the janitors? Where are the custodians? Where are the daily workers? Why are the cameras not on them? Why am I seeing a white person in a business suit? That's all the people I'm seeing running out of the World Trade Centers. You can't tell me they were emptying their own trash, Miss Lisa. You know they weren't. All right.
No.
So I want to see us on camera. I want the stories of poor black people, poor Latinx people in the World Trade Centers. I want their narrative centered.
Yeah.
All right. And that's what we're doing today. In 2001, and in a lot of cases, even today in a K through 12 system, those kind of questions are deemed to be inappropriate. Going back to what I said earlier, that's why in the church, in the synagogue, in the mosque, in the frat house, in the sorority house, those questions, those conversations have to be centered so that they are instilled, that they are ingrained in our children. So when they go out, they know that, guess what? I can walk into a room and gain the attention because guess what? I know my history. I know my culture. I know who I stand on. And ultimately, I can do anything that I put my mind to because I know from whence I have come.
That's right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's all I want to say on that, Miss Lisa. I'm sorry. I hope I talked too long.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So listen, this has been like, I told y'all it's going to be good tonight.
I sure learned a lot. I still don't.
No, don't feel that way, Miss Kim.
I know. I'm saying this. Like, oh, I ain't know that. Ooh. Oh.
It's just
I went to a predominantly white.
I still have a lot of work to do.
We need to have, because unless you are a historian or a good researcher, which I know I'm not, but talking to people like Dr. Kyle and others, it brings so much light to, our history, to who we are. Even if you got a little glimpse, it's always nice to get a little bit more, it's always good. So this has been Kitchen Talk CTC. Thank you, Kim Black, for hanging out with us tonight.
Thank you, Kim Black.
Kyle. Thank you so much, Dr. Kyle Harris, for hanging out with us. I am super excited always to come and share with you guys on Thursday nights at 9:00. Listen, we are getting ready for our summer subscriber campaign, so be on the lookout for that. Also, one of our friends, Chef Shack, has an event this weekend, so check her out. It's a Father's Day event, so we posted on our social media page. Go to her social media page, her website, Chef Shack. I think it's chefshack.com. Or Chef Shack The Experience. Just Google her because she big time for real. But she has an event.
She has good food, y'all. She got good food.
That food is beyond good. And don't get me started on the Shack tea. I'm just saying.
Oh, you just tapped into my inner big girl.
If you are watching us on YouTube or Facebook, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're watching us on Facebook, hit the like button so you will never miss another show. I do need to report this to you all, though. We are going to take a little vacation for 2 weeks. So for the rest of our Thursdays in June, we will be out. The kitchen will be closed for a little rest period, but we will be back in July. So enjoy. I might throw something up for y'all to watch, some throwback. We never know. So
take something out of the deep freezer, Miss Lisa, and warm it up for us.
I know, right? So thank you all for watching. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. Appreciate you all so much. And we're gonna see y'all in a couple of weeks.
All righty then.
Gap screen. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
All right. Good night.
Good
All right.
night.
Good
Y'all
night.
have a good one.
Nice
You
to meet